Right. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody joining us from all around the world. Welcome to the second webinar in our series on servitization strategy in action. If you have missed the first webinar, please do catch up. You can watch this webinar on demand on our website. You just have to go to the Watch on Demand section and you will find the first webinar. The topic of our first webinar was all about why the authors decided to write this book and what was the motivation behind it. And in today's webinar, we will dive a bit deeper into the different content that is covered within this book. And we also have an excellent keynote speech to introduce you. The keynote speech will be with Paul Jennings and we'll be discussing the servitization impact on business and future of industry. Paul has been in the industry of asset finance for more than 40 years and has recently retired as the managing director of JCB Finance. For those who don't know what JCB Finance is, it's a joint venture between NatWest Group and the JCB Group, which has led to very interesting value propositions for the JCB Equipment Company. And Paul will share some of his insights during his time in the asset finance industry and how this industry is a great enabler of servitization. Next, we will dive a bit deeper into the content of the book, and you will hear from our authors, Professor Tim Baines, Professor Ali Bigdeli, and Dr. Kawal Kapoor. Tim is one of the most cited scholars in the field of servitization and also the executive director of the Advanced Services Group. He's also the professor of operations strategy at Aston University and Aston Business School. Ali is our research director and also a professor of industrial service innovations in Aston University. And Kawal Kapoor is our partnership research manager who has been leading the book and the playbook design and the content itself. Kawal has first-hand experience of having seen how businesses actually adopt servitization, how they do it successfully, and what are the potholes in this journey that these businesses try and avoid. After that, we will go into a Q&A section. A little bit about ourselves. So the Advanced Services Group, we are a research-led advisory firm, and we have been helping businesses to adopt the idea of servitization to achieve the goal of service-led growth. And we do this through advice, through consulting, through training, and our flagship program, which is called the Advanced Services Partnership, which is a consortium of like-minded practitioners and businesses that are pioneering through servitization within their respective industries. Over the past decade almost, we have had experience of supporting more than 450 businesses in adopting servitization and exploring service and business model innovations. And throughout our engagement with these companies, our mission has been very focused. It has always been about service-led growth through servitization and the adoption of advanced services. And today, it brings us to the topic of servitization strategy, the book itself, which is a culmination of these decades of work with these more than 450 companies. The book is the single most important book if you want to understand the what, the why, and the how of servitization. And this is what the research team, Kawal, Ali, and Tim have been focusing on for the past few years, of untangling these different aspects of servitization. And to distill this further, we also have the Servitization Playbook, which helps any business, any senior executive to take the servitization strategy book and apply its key principles within your business to drive service-led growth. It gives you an exact route plan on what are the steps you need to take to start your journey and to deliver successful servitization strategies within your organizations. If you haven't placed your orders yet, please go on servitizationstrategy.com and you can buy the book and also the playbook And at this stage, I would like to hand over to Paul, and Paul will be dealing with some very interesting questions, and I'm very excited to listen to him next. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Parikshit. That's a very nice introduction. Thank you. Firstly, well, I'm Paul Jennings, and it's my privilege to be setting the context of the book in the first place, Servitization Strategy. I remember reading with interest a book that also carried Tim's name as an author. It was published in 2013 called Made to Serve. And still, I take hints and tips about servitization from it. And it was written, as I say, over 10 years ago. And things have changed a little in that the background to the new book is that we've got increasing globalization. Of course, globalization introduces more opportunities for manufacturers, but it also creates extra competitive forces, particularly for indigenous manufacturers. I've got 3 questions for leaders within manufacturers. The first one is, how do we out-discount low-cost suppliers? Can we really out-discount low-cost manufacturers as they come into our markets? The second question, well, I guess if I go back to that, a good topical issue is Chinese EVs into Europe and America at the moment. There are difficulties in the pricing strategies for the local manufacturers, given the low-cost electric vehicles that are being introduced to those markets. So what are those manufacturers going to do? I'm afraid I don't have any particular answer for cars. But secondly, manufacturers have to ask themselves, what can help us achieve our net zero targets as pressures begin to rise on that? How can we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, not only in the manufacturing process, but the whole life cycle of our goods? And then thirdly, how can we help customers acquire more of our machines? Government intervention is one thing, tax allowances, subsidies, but in my world, self-help is the best kind of help. So we're going to look at those 3 questions as we go through the next few minutes. But as far as the new book is concerned, straight away, I'd like to say it's got to be mandatory reading for CEOs, COOs, CFOs, CIOs, in fact, the whole of the C-suite, and small businesses, SMEs, asset funders, and fintech people. But a bit more, I've been asked to say a bit more about me. I have been in finance for 50 years, 43 years of those with JCB Finance. And as we heard, it's a joint venture between NatWest and JCB, with NatWest having 75% of the shares and JCB 25%. JCB is into construction, agricultural and industrial machinery around the world. I recently retired as the MD of JCB Finance 18 months ago, but during my time there, I really enjoyed linking customer leases on products with service repair and maintenance agreements, with insurance, extended warranty. I managed and set residual values on construction and other machinery, and introduced point of sale IT that was able to improve and restructure sales processes for both salespeople and customers. Personally, I was very pleased to see JCB Finance receive the International Asset Finance Network European Captive Vendor of the Year award in 2019. And for myself, I'm an honorary fellow of the London Institute of Banking and Finance, a fellow of the Chartered Management Institute, and a visiting professor at Aston. I was previously a board director of the Finance and Leasing Association in London and chaired the Asset Finance Division. And in 2022, I received a lifetime award from the Asset Finance Connect organisation, which I was really grateful for. I'm now principal of Anson Research, which is a small consultancy acting as a sort of dating agency between manufacturers asset financiers and fintech people. But I've been delighted to be associated with Tim and the team at the Advanced Services Group for several years now. It's great to be attached to a world-leading organisation such as that. So I'm very pleased with that. But let's move on to the importance of servitization for businesses and the wider economy. I'd like to start with the UK. Jobs-wise, the UK used to employ 25% of the workforce in manufacturing. That was in since 1980, it's declined to 8% of the workforce. But output in real terms has increased as productivity has improved, making the UK still an important player in the global scene. In fact, the UK moved from 9th position to 8th position in 2023 in terms of manufacturing. However, it's services where the UK economy has really concentrated during my career anyway. Last year, the UK earned a trade surplus on services of £153 billion, and that was up a staggering 70% on 2016, making the UK second only to the US at provision of services. What I'm trying to say with these stats is that the UK is good at services. So back to those three questions. It's my belief that servitization can provide powerful answers. Against question one, I think that we can, servitization can allow manufacturers to compete better, not just on price of the goods alone, but providing tailored outcomes that provide real value to customers. I see it can increasingly aid net zero progress to meet targets for both manufacturers and customers. And from an asset finance point of view, I can see growing sales by changing the sales process to add finance in there, which in my language, it lubricates transactions and helps sales teams and customers get deals over the line. Just a quick word on telematics. It's having a growing impact, as I'm sure we're all aware, but not just for manufacturers. Manufacturers are certainly receiving extraordinary amounts of performance data on their machines and vehicles back to their factories and offices. And customers are making far more use of those bits of the information that they're allowed to have by manufacturers, for instance, making fleet operation more efficient, etc. But there's a missing piece there in that as goods, as assets, machines get more and more complicated and innovative as we move into the future, funders are going to have to derive reassurance about the value and utilization of those goods to justify lending the money in the first place. So there is a missing link there, which we can perhaps discuss in a little more detail in a second too. Telematics is going to be good for people who invest in goods. But perhaps I could do something different now and ask us just to play at a case study. And I'm going to take a few minutes just to roll through a case study. And it's based on something that Tim said to me some while ago now. And it really did have some resonance for me. He said many manufacturers still are in the business of selling a machine, maybe supplying some spare parts thereafter, and hoping to get some service contracts to cover the machines in the future. That to me is wasted opportunity if that pattern is adopted. And we'll just have a look why. And I'm not quoting Tim directly, that's me putting his words in my words, but I think there's a good 80% of that he'll agree with, I hope anyway. So let's firm up on this fictitious case study, because I'm going to ask us all to imagine that we're working in a manufacturing business. We are a long-standing manufacturer of road sweeper trucks. They cost around £200,000 each. We have a good reputation in the UK and Europe. We have a customer who's looking to buy one unit today. They're a business with a hire fleet of at least 20 units, although not all of them are ours. That's big money The trucks are hired out to end users for a weekly rental, but they can be for a long-term or a short-term contract. Our customers don't usually have £200,000 hidden under the bed. So how are they going to pay us this time? Shall we again leave this aspect to the customer to sort out with various funders? Shall we leave it to chance that they may or may not get funding this time? Our truck will definitely need spares on a regular basis. These sweepers are very complicated units, and they are also possessed of wearing parts. Unfortunately for us, there's an active market in non-genuine spare parts. The trucks will definitely need servicing throughout their life too, but the customer does have some maintenance people, staff of their own. Now, our telematics systems are gaining importance in terms of informing us of machine performance. Customers are experimenting with some of the information that we allow them to have to improve the efficiencies of their hire fleet and, for instance, conduct daily checks and make sure that those daily checks are done. The trucks have diesel engines. In fact, they have two diesel engines, one for mobility and the other to power the vacuum, the enormous vacuum and sweeper system that actually does the road sweeping. They regularly work off-site in remote locations, kind of off-grid. So in the future, battery is probably not going to be an option that we can pursue. The diesel fuel is brought to the truck because the truck doesn't go to any filling station. The diesel is brought to the truck every day by a supplier nominated by the end user. The job that the road sweeper is required for today is for a long-term contract to help in the building of a new logistics warehouse for an online retailer in a greenfield site. Site roads and public access roads have to be continually cleaned because of the fears of health and safety mishaps, litigation, or breaches of planning permissions. Pressure is increasing on us, the manufacturer, to report our greenhouse gas emissions by way of our CO2 equivalent tonnes emissions in our annual accounts for the world to see. Ultimately, we'll somehow need to report the truck's whole life CO2 emissions as well. The same pressure is affecting our customer, their end user, the construction company, and also the online retailer. In fact, the online retailer and their investors, some of them are pension funds, they want a net zero warehouse. Our competition in our home market is increasing too. Several new suppliers have recently become active in our home markets. Product innovation is really getting underway too in several directions, causing uncertainty, some uncertainty about used equipment values in the future. There's something novel in that green hydrogen is seen as a possible fuel solution for our equipment to cut greenhouse gas emissions. We may need to embark on some research and development in the medium to long term, and we might need to, or certainly will need to, involve our engine suppliers in that as well. Questions are bound to arise between us about who will make our green hydrogen, who will supply it, what will the cost be. In fact, this morning I was on another call with a producer of green hydrogen, and they said, UK, it's not really progressing as well as we thought so far, but Germany, it's going, quote, gangbusters. And in the USA, with the government subsidies that are available, we're going to see some extreme drops in hydrogen prices, which will mean it's a viable fuel in the not too distant future. So what will be the cost? What will be the safety aspects of us using hydrogen versus diesel? Can we create extra value in the future with this new fuel and the way that it's dispensed? Our telematics are to be upgraded again to show a vehicle health warning, together with a red, amber, green process that will eventually show poor driver practice and include any detected abuse of our machine. We're becoming confident about guaranteeing uptime on our current models. Our products have always enjoyed high values in the used equipment market. There's a peculiarity, though, in the way that we all do business in our little market that we serve. customers bill out their customers on weekly terms for hours used. And there's a real conflict between how the money goes into our customer and how the money is required to go out to the customer with their finance agreements on each of the trucks. In fact, we've heard that the customer regularly wishes to match their finance payments to utilization levels because work in the road sweeper business is seasonal. There are holiday periods, there is winter low time. We've not wanted to interfere in this kind of topic with our customer in the past. We just leave it between them and their various financiers. And we assume they'll all come to some kind of agreement together, maybe magically. As the sector certainly becomes more complicated, as I've mentioned one or two of the issues that are arising, customers are also beginning to tell us and demand a one-stop shop for the way that they acquire their road sweepers. So that's my little case study. There are quite a few old issues, old thorny issues, but there are also some new issues. And our management team, all of us on this call, will have a cross-section of views, be it about hydrogen or be it about interfering with the customer on finance stuff. We'll have different views. But we will, as a management team, need to derive consensus, won't we? And put a strategy together to become more responsive to customers' needs and outcomes, and to begin to form relationships with a range of firms who could help us deliver what our customer wants, which is more than just the truck, just some spares, and just a few service contracts. So I wonder, in the modern day, what can help us get this ball rolling? And I think some of the answers are here. Many, many of the answers are here. So I'm sorry to trouble you or burden you with that case study. We're not taking it any further apart from just to think about the issues. And if you are a manufacturer, I'm sorry if I'm teaching this, you to, as we say, suck eggs here. But I thought it was worthwhile just demonstrating some of the points that the new market situation has about it compared to the market situation that was around in 2013. So looking at the contribution that the Advanced Services Group research team, what the book means for uptake or even acceleration of servitization, I think the new book is where it's at. It's been derived from 10 years worth of meticulous research, and it's timely. I think it's timely because it's a great body of reference, but it's also a great body of stimulus to make us think, as manufacturers in particular, or financiers, stimulus towards servitization at the right moment. It's timely because it offers answers to the three questions, some answers and some direction and some great enlightenment towards those questions. And it's timely as well because telematics, the Internet of Things, is maturing to provide information for servitization. Telematics will be the underpinning that provides servitization with the boost and the answers to these difficult questions that I've alluded to. My personal view on the book is that, first of all, I'd like to congratulate Tim and Ali and Cal for what they produced. There are three contributors, obviously, and they've been able to weave seamlessly a clear step-by-step guide to servitization strategy. Each chapter carries its own summary and reference material, and it's a must-read for any manufacturer, financial person, and that's asset finance, fintech operation, media people, and government policy makers. It underlines the degree of experience within the Advanced Services Group, but my key point is that it marks a real shift from manufacturers thinking of their goods as transactional. I think it's going to build, servitization is going to build a very powerful customer-centric relationship model And the book will be a talisman on servitization for years to come. So thank you for your ears, and I'll hand back to Parikshit.
Thanks a lot, Paul. And thank you very much for that excellent fictitious case study. Although a lot of the people in the audience, I'm sure, can already resonate and see their own companies being reflected in that description. Thanks a lot. For the audience, if you have any questions, please do use the Q&A function. If you have questions for Paul or any questions coming up next for the authors, or if you have comments on Paul's fictitious case study and how you would adopt servitization to solve those challenges. At this point, then I'll hand over to Ali to tell us a bit more about the content of the book. Ali, over to you.
Thank you, Parikshit. Good afternoon, everyone. A personal thank you to Paul for your introduction and also your summary of the book. Certainly, your experience definitely helped us in making of the book. So for the next, let's say, 20-25 minutes, myself, Cal, and Tim want to take you through the details of the book, different parts of the book. For those who've seen or got the book but haven't had a chance to read it through, the book has got three main parts. Each part has got its own different subsections, where the first part starts talking about the what is servitization and what are advanced services, different types of services that are out there. And then we move into the why question, the importance of the benefits, of the opportunities that servitization can bring to the firms, to the economy, and Cal will talk to us about that. And then the third and most interesting part of the book is the part 3 of the book, where we talk about the how. And the how to bring about servitization through innovation of advanced services. And Tim will talk to us about part 3. So in part 1 of the book, which we focus on the what, if we move the slides, please. There are different ways in which we can actually define servitization and explain what servitization is. I still can't see the slide being moved. Maybe it's me, but oh, thank you. So there are different ways in which we can define servitization and explain what it is. At heart, for us, servitization is a new business model, a services-led business models for those companies with the heritage of product and production. And for explaining what it is, we've used a business model framework, the one that you can see on the screen, with 3+1 quadrant. The main quadrant on the top left is about the value proposition, is about the actual service offering. What is it that the customer will actually get? What's the manufacturer provides to the customers to enable their jobs to be done? And it's where we explain different types of services offerings. So some of you may have seen the services staircase, where it focuses on base, intermediate, and advanced services. And ultimately, we move into the top right quadrant, which we talk about the different value delivery systems, how those offerings gets delivered to the customers. And in the book, we explain about the co-creation of a value, different delivery systems that different manufacturers have used. And we've used a lot of different examples as to how manufacturers has actually co-create these offerings with customers and with their end users in actual practice. Then we move into the bottom left quadrant, where we talk about the value capture or revenue model. And there's a screenshot on the top right corner of the slide where we talk about different revenue models that we've seen in practice that companies have used to actually charge their customers. So, for instance, they can charge a customer per output, per outcome, based on the time that the customers are using the assets in the operations. In the case of, for instance, a train manufacturer, based on the number of passengers. And there are different ways in which these revenue models can be applied and can be implemented. And again, in section 3 of part 1, we actually explain different revenue models in the book. And ultimately, the bottom right quadrant, the green quadrant, is about the competitive advantage. So we try to explain how these three main quadrants, what the value proposition, the revenue model, and and also the value co-creation, how do these three components enable manufacturers to stand out in the competition, and what drives their competitive advantage when we talk about servitization. So in part 1, just to summarize, in part 1, we talk about the what's. We explain what do we mean by servitization through the lens of business model and business model framework. And we deep dive into different examples of co-creation, value co-creation, revenue model, and also the competitive advantage. In part 2, we move into explaining the benefits and the why of servitization, and I hand over to my colleague Carol, who will take us through some of the details on part 2. Over to you, Carol.
Thank you, Ali. Afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Paul. I have to. I was nearly making notes for the case study. I didn't know where this was going. If you were going to expect answers for the questions you were putting forth, so yeah. But thank you for the start. You've actually, Paul, laid out the foundation for some of the things I'm going to cover. So grateful for that. Right. By the time we move to part 2 of the book, we start to look at why firms should give attention to servitization. We know servitization is challenging, and we know businesses need proof that this is a good idea, that it's going to be feasible, financially rewarding for their firms. So in this part of the book, we look at the evidence, and most of the evidence that's documented here is drawn from independent research studies about the impact that servitization has had on firms. And these are the firms that have traditionally competed through products, and they have now subsequently developed service strategies. And all of the evidence that we were looking at, we could structure them around 4 arguments. And these were about what servitization does to the economic performance of a firm, what it does to the economic growth of a firm, how it affects the resilience of a firm, and what it means for the sustainability of that firm. So in terms of the economic performance of a firm, what changes when a firm expands what it offers beyond just products? And we've seen some compelling evidence that suggests when a firm adds more services, it can boost their revenues, their profits, and productivity. And this is not just anecdotal. We have global surveys and reports that are consistently pointing towards a rising trend in revenue from services. So if you look at annual reports from firms like Rolls-Royce, GE Power, Schneider Electric, they're all showing they've earned increasing revenues from services. Then we have research studying the link between services and profits, and it's a bit like a mixed bag of candy. Some studies show a clear boost to profitability, but others don't suggest quite the same. So one of the reasons that's discussed around this discrepancy in research is how profitability gets measured. So that various metrics out there, so things like returns in sales, market share, pure profit, return on investment, and it can be tough to tease out what it exactly means for your firm's overall financial performance. And overall, though, the trend suggests that the total net profit a firm can make with servitization is likely to increase. So for some firms, starting out with services might mean a temporary dip in profits, but once they hit a critical mass and get the things rolling, profitability can significantly improve. There's also statistics about how servitization boosts productivity. So firms that are offering more advanced services, so proactive solutions, for example, they tend to have higher productivity levels than those just offering base services like the usual guarantees and warranties. And looking at a recent survey, and we're talking at the likes of 27% increase in productivity. So that's the level of increase that's being recorded. Then we looked at what servitization does for a firm's economic growth. So specifically, the expansion and increase in a firm's market presence, like new channels to market, international trade, new product introduction. And what we saw is that global economy is becoming increasingly service driven, with services now accounting for 65% of the global GDP. And this presents a massive opportunity for firms to tap into a growing market. So if you look at leading manufacturers like IBM, Xerox, they've successfully expanded into services. They have been able to unlock new revenue streams, and servitization has opened doors for them to previously untapped markets. And all of these case studies and case examples have been elaborated in the book across part 2. And in terms of international trade, services are becoming a large part of it, and it is expected that they'll make up for 1/3 of the global trade by 2040. And this means manufacturers who embrace services can tap into this booming export market. Then, in terms of new product introduction, evidence tells us that offering new products as a service reduces upfront costs for customers. It reduces a certain level of risks for customers, and this makes it easier for them to embrace services, to embrace disruptive technologies. We also came across evidence for what servitization does to the resilience of a firm when weathering economic storms, when responding to competitors. And research shows that firms with service-based business models tend to be more resilient to these economic disruptions. They can adapt more quickly. They can tap into a broader network of resources. Because services allows a firm to diversify revenue streams, it makes a firm less reliant on product sales alone, and this helps them create a buffer against fluctuations in specific markets, industries. Then about building barriers to competition with services was also something that we picked up on. Offering services, especially those that are focused on customer outcomes, helps firms stand out from competitors who only sell products. And services create this strong, direct, long-lasting relationship with customers for a service provider, for a manufacturer, and that makes it harder for the rival firms to just lure a customer away on the basis of just low price. So service-oriented businesses, what they also do is they help firms develop this deep knowledge. Firms gather a lot of data insights, and this becomes difficult for competitors to replicate, and it creates that competitive advantage for the firms. And the final aspect we found evidence around was sustainability. And the general message is that there is a positive impact in terms of resource efficiency, circular economy, dematerialization. If you look at servitization, because a lot of ownership, in most of the cases, ownership of the products is retained by the manufacturer, there is a certain incentive for these firms to design products that last longer. They want to use now fewer materials, consume less energy. So you can see that the service-oriented mindset is naturally promoting resource efficiency. And again, all the data that they're gathering, that they're analyzing on product usage that's sitting on customer sites, this enables manufacturers to identify opportunities for improvement, for further optimizing the resource consumption. We're also closing the loop for circular economy with service models. Again, because the ownership is retained, there is an incentive for manufacturers to design for durability, for repair, for reuse, overall just reducing waste. And a similar sort of argument comes up around dematerialization, because there is this inherent encouragement to use fewer materials, because the focus is on delivering outcomes. It's not on volume of products sold. And we've seen that with service-based business models, because a manufacturer is not inherently, self-sufficient. There's, in terms of capabilities and resources, there's a lot of collaboration happening, a lot of resource sharing happening across industries, and this leads to further reduction in material usage. So, of all the evidence that we've accumulated in the book, that we put across these 2 chapters in part 2 of the book, we don't claim any of these as forecasts of how servitization will impact a specific business, how it will impact your firm, because circumstances are different for different firms. But with these arguments, by putting them together, by summarizing them, we wanted to put forth what is already known about servitization, and we wanted to create that foundation that we could use to analyze the likely effect of servitization on individual firms. So we present these arguments as hypotheses about how servitization is likely to impact different aspects of a firm. So that, in a nutshell, is what's happening in part 2 of the book. So for part 3, if I can now hand it over to Tim.
So part 3 of the book speaks directly to the case study that Paul just mentioned. If you are a management team and you have heard about this thing called servitization, then how do you go about it? How do you evaluate whether it has potential for your firm? How do you test to see whether that potential can actually be realized in practice? And then how do you bring it about? So in the book, one of the first things we actually do is summarize the research that we've carried out over the past decade, both through research projects and through working with firms, to actually understand how those firms are more successful, have gone about it. It's been quite tricky because, of course, when you go to a firm and you start to talk about an innovation like servitization, it very quickly gets wrapped up in conversations such as a conversation about digital or a conversation about contracts or financing. And one of the challenges we've had is actually to disentangle, to unpick the evidence that we've seen in firms and make sense of it. And in the book, you'll see that we talk about how we've done this and how we've understood that those firms that do servitization well go through a process where they manage the interplay between business model innovation and also organizational change in a very clever way. And we talk about that in the book. And on the basis of understanding that interplay and understanding that business model innovation takes place earlier in the process, and organizational change takes place later, we've been able to put forward what we call a route planner. And the route planner is summarized in the book. It's the evidence underpinning it is described and pieced together, but it's shown at the bottom of this slide here, and it talks about the process as an aggregate that firms go through. And it talks about how firms will explore the opportunity, engage with the opportunity, scale the opportunity, expand and scale the opportunity, and then exploit it, and some of the activities that they need to carry out to achieve that. And that route planner we're really mindful of is key for firms wanting to get into this space. So on the basis of the route planner, we've also produced a second publication. And if I can move the slide on, Christina, please. The second publication is actually what we call the playbook, and the playbook is shown here. And what it is a high-level summary of the steps to go through. In the first instance, it talks about the capabilities that, if they're in place inside the firm, will make your journey to servitization easier, and perhaps how to acquire those capabilities if you haven't got them. And then it'll take you through the execution of that route planner process, step by step, explaining to you, for example, how to create an argument, form a coalition, get the resources together to actually go out and explore whether and engage with the conversation of servitization, how to segment the market, look for carrying out empathy mapping, customer value propositions, revenue models. It'll take you through those various steps and summarize those at quite a high level so that you can navigate your own process, your own way through this process. And at the end of it all, it'll say, okay, so we've taken you through the innovation of a new services business model. What do you do next? How do you reflect upon what you've achieved? How do you then decide what the next steps are going to be? And almost restart the process again. Because, of course, the process of servitization, the process of innovating a firm so that more and more the firm competes on the basis of outcomes rather than simply transactional sale of products, that process is an ongoing process. And for many firms will deliver benefits in the near future and in an ongoing way. It's not something that you do once, it's something that you can continue to do and at every step of the way reap benefits for the firm. And that's all captured inside the Servitization playbook. So the book and the playbook operate together as companions. The book describes the heritage, describes the in-depth work that we've done to understand this area, and the playbook makes sense of it in a very pragmatic way for firms, just like inside Paul's case study, firms where executives are busy and they want to know what they can do right away to explore servitization. So thank you for that. I'll hand you back now to Parachute.
Thanks a lot, Tim. And thank you to all the authors for their very detailed description of what's happening in the book. So while we gather some questions, and they are already coming in, I have pulled out a few to start with. First question, if I may, Paul, I'll start with you. There's a question that has come through asking about the resale market and how servitization impacts the organized and disorganized aspects of the resale market. How have you seen in your experience with JCB Finance that servitization plays in hand with this area?
It's a great question and it's quite tricky. But I find that if machines have been looked after properly under the terms of an extensive service contract, they're going to have a far better track record of quality of asset when it comes to return the asset. Generally, it's a finance company that will own the asset, and there was a trend right the way through from the 1970s through to fairly recently where assets, when they came back, would just go to auction, or they would be sold as distressed items or a distressed condition. But if products have been properly looked after, not only can they be put forward as a sale in a quality used condition, but they can also be released or reservitized, if you like, with a second player. And that then starts to feature in circularity. And as truck manufacturers have found over the years, if they can, I don't want to use the word control the secondary market, but certainly have big influence in the secondary market, it does help with brand loyalty and it helps to keep other suppliers out. So I hope that's a rounded reflection of my opinion on the impact on used equipment.
Thanks a lot, Paul. I think it also works with Cowell's point about the circular economy, and that servitization almost incentivizes the product to stay in use. And there might not be a distinction of fresh new equipment and resale equipment. It's all the one single segment of equipment, and they can be moving in between different customers. Have you seen that as well in some of your experience?
There has been some of that. I would go further. I'd look back at that case study, and I'm sorry if I encourage people to think they got to write it down, but maybe it was something that was memorable to do just to listen. But if we as the road sweeper manufacturer are going to guarantee uptime, we're going to actually feel the same pains that the customer usually feels with a downtime incident, because we're going to be responsible to sort it out. And I think what Rolls-Royce on the Power by the Hour proposition saw early on in the development of that was to simplify the bits and pieces I'm sorry to trivialize jet engines, but simplify the bits and pieces that went into the jet engines to make sure that they were simpler and the wearable parts didn't wear out as fast, because it was going to be an expense that Rolls-Royce, or in the case of the road sweeper example, they are going to bear within their service contract with the customer. So it has a really good impact on ultimately the quality and serviceability of an asset.
Thank you, Paul. Any authors would like to comment?
Yes, if I may, Parachute. It's a very good question, because as we talk about inside the book, actually servitization has been key to maintaining the resale value of the asset. And the example that we talk about is that with Alstom and Trainlife Services, and we refer to this also in Made to Serve, how Alstom was engaged in the maintenance of the train by the financiers, because the financiers wanted to look after their investment, and the firm that was best placed to ensure that that train was serviced most effectively was of course the company that manufactured it in the first place. So it's not that servitization undermines the resale value, it's quite the opposite. It supports the resale value, because it's all about ensuring the product is maintained in the best possible way.
Thanks a lot, Tim. I think that answers the question very well. Question maybe for Cowell, if I may. Cowell, so you have spoken about how servitization delivers this 4 levels of impact for manufacturers. Do you see servitization only for manufacturers, or do you have some other examples, or have you seen servitization being applied for service providers or other types of businesses as well?
I mean, in this instance, in the book as well, that we do make references to, other. Not necessarily, we go towards service providers, and we have, for instance, we touch on Apple and Uber, and we're looking at the other aspects, and we do know that servitization is not unique to manufacturing, although the scope of our book, and in this instance, majority of the research that we've done over the years has been in the manufacturing space. But we know that this is being played out in other, if you look at the larger value network, you can see servitization being played out across different players as well. But yeah, we've not gone into the details of it. We made references to it as and when we explore different aspects of the servitization. But then again, like we claim expertise of everything that's happening in the manufacturing space to do with servitization, we don't have that with the others. But there is active acknowledgement that this plays out across different network players as well.
Thanks, Cowell. Tim?
If I may add to that, one of the things that we've tried to ensure, particularly with the playbook, is that the route planner process that we see is independent of whether it's a firm with a product platform which is seen to expand into outcome-based business models, or whether it's a firm with a services platform that's seeking to expand into outcome-based business models by pulling in more product. So the research in the space does favour manufacturing firms. That's where a lot of research has been carried out. But the process that we put forward is agnostic to whether it's either a product or a service base that you're starting with.
Thanks.
Just one final bit for me is that there are also a couple of examples in the book, but in general, that's a lot of businesses that they're not the manufacturer of the actual product also provide outcome-based contracts on the product that they're providing to the customer. So they're not necessarily the manufacturer of the product, but they do their own servitization realm and provide outcome-based contracts to their customer. So yeah, just just more addition to that comment.
Yeah, we make references to the retail industry, tech providers. So we've looked at it. We're not, we're not blindsided that side of things, but majority of the groundwork comes from manufacturing space at this moment.
Thanks, Carol. Question, Ali, if I may ask you one. You spoke about the business model innovation angle and that there are these 4 quadrants of how we break down any business's model. You started to refer to it in a certain sequence. Do you see that this business model is built up in a certain sequence, or are all 4 of these blocks, the 4 quadrants, quite interchangeable?
I think if you're asking about the sequence of designing a new business model around services, I think there is this, the way I see it, the way we see it, is that it always starts with the customer before any other quadrant. You need to think about the value proposition. You need to understand the customer's operations, the customer requirements, and then actually do empathize and do the empathy mapping with the customers to understanding what is it that keeps them awake at night. And then the rest of the quadrants will follow. I mean, you start with understanding what the customer value proposition is, what sort of offering you can provide to the customers, and then you move into let's co-create this value with the customers to how you're going to deliver it towards your customer. And then in parallel, you also start experimenting some of these different revenue models, depending on, again, the customer's operations. In the book, we refer to, I think, 8 or 9 different revenue models, which can be applied to a single offering. A lot of times we get the question around, is leasing a servitization? And the answer is yes and no, because leasing is just a revenue model that you use on a specific offering. So everything starts with the customer when it comes to the design of the new business model, especially when it's servitization, because it's very much customized around the operation of the customers, and then you move on to the next part, and everything is usually done through co-developmental exercises and experimentation in customers' operations.
Thanks, Ali. Any other comments from the authors? If not, I have one last question for Tim, if I may. Tim, you mentioned in the 3rd part of how you implement servitization, there is an interplay between business model innovation and organizational change. And there seems to be a sequence within this interplay. Why do we see this sequence, and why are these 2 things looked at differently as separate entities?
It's a great question. So firms which move into this space and do it well manage this interplay in a particular way. Firms which don't do it well tend to fail because they don't manage the interplay well. So classically, you'll see firms will say, interest in servitization, it's about change management. So therefore, let's start to talk about coming up with a vision for the firm. Let's talk about the mission for the firm, the strategy, blah, blah, blah. And what they find is that the challenge is just too overwhelming, and they very often find it difficult to proceed because they haven't got the evidence base that a new service-based business model is really worth the firm investing in. So they struggle. The firms which do it well, what they tend to do is they say, okay, we recognize there could be an opportunity in this service-based business model, but let's experiment with that service business model in a bubble. Let's just allow that innovation to be tested and proven out. And if it looks like that innovation has legs, could really offer a brand new value proposition for the firm, then we'll look to bring it inside the firm. And if we bring enough of these in, then we'll start to change the behavior of the firm, change the organization to support these new business models. So it's not that you have to approach it in this way, but rather it's a statement that those firms that do approach it in this way of matching the organizational change and the business model into play carefully, those firms tend to be more successful. And so therefore, that's the structure on which we've created the playbook and the route planner, which is described within.
Thanks a lot, Tim. And I think that brings us to the end of this webinar. First of all, I would like to thank Paul for his time and sharing his insights and the excellent case study as well. Thank you very much, Paul. And of course, thanks to the authors for telling us a bit more about the content within the book. Finally, thank you to all of the attendees who stayed with us and went into the details of the book, asked very interesting questions as well. If you haven't had a chance to look at the book yet, please go to servitizationstrategy.com and you can order the book and the playbook both. And for those who haven't had a chance to look at the first webinar, you can catch up on that on demand on our website. And thank you very much to Christina in the background for making sure everything goes smoothly. Thanks all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.